Welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. In the wake of the Bonn Climate Summit in Germany, which will continue until November 17th, the topic of green energy has captured the world's attention once again. Having signed the Paris Climate Agreement in April of last year, Ukraine has committed itself to investing and developing its green energy sector. To help us understand how the Ukrainian government plans to do this is our next guest, Deputy Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Mykola Kuzyo. Hello and thank you for coming.
Hello and thank you for inviting me.
So how does Ukrainian government plan to develop the energy sector of Ukraine?
Thank you very much for the question. I would like to start from a broader perspective.
The
key issue of any such kind of a policy is to provide the necessary strategic frameworks. The first step was to adopt a comprehensive and a coherent energy strategy, which have been adopted very recently, and which foresee key objectives and key policy aims in terms of development of the energy sector, and including issues related to the implementation in Ukraine of the Paris Agreement.
What are those key peculiarities that are written in the strategy?
I would say that the key issue which is preserved in the strategy is how Ukraine will implement so-called NDCs, nationally determined contributions, which are envisaged by the Paris Agreement as a key instrument of the country to track countries' implementation of the Paris Agreement. If you go in terms of content, I think that the most important issue is that the strategy foresee an instrument to boost the development of the renewables. I mean, renewable energy sources.
How many renewable energy sources can we boast of in Ukraine these days? What are their main
Currently, the amount of the renewables in Ukraine is, I would say, very low. And
comparing to other countries or overall?
In absolute numbers, as well as comparing to other countries. And the strategy foresees to increase the level of renewables up to 16% to 2035. And
now the number of the renewable energy sources that we can talk about now.
It's up to 4%.
It's only 4, and you plan to make it 16 within like 15 years.
Yeah, but anyway, what I would like also to add that the aspect of implementation of the Paris Agreement is broader than the energy sector. Of course, energy sector is a key sector which contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. And so, of course, we have to first of all focus on this sector. But also there are other sectors,
which are?
Industries, and we also can contribute, for example, on energy efficiency issues. And you also know that there is a broad range of instruments, strategies, programs tackling the energy efficiency issue in Ukraine.
What kind of programs or any other opportunities is Ukraine using as far as energy efficiency goes?
First of all, new credit lines were launched a couple of years ago, and now are being implemented. So households and business can use these credits to improve energy efficiency of their buildings. Also,
how is that done? How can a certain building improve the energy efficiency of that very same building?
Of course, first of all, they have to make a project and the technical documentation, and then they can address and apply for a part of a credit to the special program to the respective state institution, which can cover some expenditures in terms of improving of the energy efficiency.
Are there any results on that? Any households already using this opportunity?
Yes, it started already, and there is a number of households and big buildings which already started using this money. So there are already some results, and the main body responsible for this program is the Energy Efficiency Agency, who is steering this process. Another issue which is also planned in Ukraine to launch so-called Energy Efficiency Fund, which required a new law and a new system to be established, and there was an agreement with the European Union which will contribute financially to this fund, and this also will allow to provide necessary financial instruments to implement this energy efficiency strategy in the Ukraine, which also partly is envisaged in the general strategy as such. And the third very important component, which tackle climate issues in, again, even more broader perspectives than just in energy, is a so-called low-carbon development strategy, which is foreseen by the Paris Agreement and in future will be a key instrument in terms of implementation of the Paris Agreement in Ukraine.
In future, could you be more specific? What time frame are we talking about here?
The Paris Agreement entered into force not so far time before.
Not that long ago.
Not long ago. So, and only now, as you mentioned today in Bonn, all negotiations are going in terms of the concrete and the specific mechanisms how this agreement will be implemented. That's why I'm saying in the future, because it depends on how this, what the results of these negotiations will be. But anyway, in the agreements, there is a direct statement that one of the instruments will be so-called low-carbon development strategies. So it's a perspective, let's say, mid-term perspective, 3-5 years.
Low-carbon development strategy, are we talking about building new plants or re-equipping the existing ones or about car production? What exactly are we talking about here?
Here we're talking about, in fact, the transformation of the economy and its transition to low-carbon technologies. It means modernization and using equipment and the different kind of production schemes and systems with low carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions.
So we're talking here about Ukraine transforming into a country with green economy.
Absolutely.
But green economy is not only the issue of low carbon emissions development strategy. What else is there in the green economy?
Again, the concept of the green economy or green growth, at the core of this concept is that we can grow and we can grow keeping environment safe and protecting environment at the same time. And there is such a term as decoupling. It means to split economic growth and more use of the different kind of resources. So then you will not depend on the use of resources while you are growing. And that's why
Is that really possible in Ukraine?
In fact, our research is done with different international institutes and organizations shows that we have some sectors with a very huge potential on that. First of all, one of them we mentioned today, it's energy efficiency. Another, for example, is organic agriculture. We have a lot of, first of all, small and medium-sized enterprises, which in fact are doing organic agriculture, but they have no, for example, resources to get necessary certifications. There are other infrastructure obstacles for them to reach necessary markets for their products. So if we will introduce necessary action plan and the change a system a bit, it will boost organic agriculture in Ukraine even more. On the other hand, even within existing circumstances, organic agriculture is increasing in Ukraine. So a big potential is there, and a lot of researchers confirms this statement.
Well, agricultural sector has always been strong in Ukraine. Any other sectors?
So these are two ones: energy efficiency and agriculture, on which we are focused.
Which are the milestones of the strategy.
Key one, yeah. But there are also other sectors. Let's say water sector. If you look in Ukraine, how much water we use for 1 unit of water is 5 times more than in Western countries.
How can we change that?
We have to change the management structure of water resources. We have to introduce integrated water management in Ukraine, and we have to give a more flexibility to this sector. It means that we have to introduce instruments which will allow a key government body to be more flexible in terms of water management.
And what about new equipment?
It's also issue of involvement of private sector in this area, because currently everything is held by the state, and there are very limited possibilities for private sector to invest into the water equipment, into laboratories, into infrastructure.
It's monopolized, and
Absolutely.
that is why the private investors cannot enter this sector.
Private sector wants to be sure that if they will invest, they will also use this infrastructure.
And they will not suffer losses, first of all.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
How can we ensure investors, especially international investors, of the transparent procedure, of the fact that the money will be safe and the process is going to be developing?
We are working on that with the World Bank and with OECD, and currently we are developing, and the EBRD also, we are developing a new strategy for the water sector, which will include development of the so-called irrigation sector for Ukraine, and which foresees the split in the current governing system, and all assets which are related to management of infrastructure, providing services, should be put it into public company. Which will be able to attract investment, and also new legislation also should be put in place, which will allow organization of water users and will then make possible for them to invest into the infrastructure. So this will be the mechanism to provide transparency, and also to for the investors to be sure that they can invest and then use services they need.
How much is Ukrainian government involved in all of these processes right now? I mean, the ministries?
We, as the Ministry of Environment, we are responsible for the water sector.
What about other ministries?
Also, Ministry
Trade
of
and Economic?
Also, Ministry of Regional Development. They are responsible for urban water, so for water which we have in the cities. And we are working together on all the strategy and all the aspects to ensure that, for example, water sector will be reformed in a coherent way, which is very challenging issue, taking into account how huge the sector is and how important water is, and also taking into account, for example, climate change. Because in the future we will have less water, and we have to learn how to use it more efficiently.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
so much for this informative conversation. That was Mykola Kuzyo. He is the Deputy Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.